They timed their chores to watch her pass. Every dawn, when the mist still clung to the pines, Naomi Ashford walked the hill road toward the Ironcrest estate with a canvas healer's bag over her shoulder and ash on her boots. The path curved around a rock scar where young wolves used to leap for sport. Now it served a different purpose. Eyes peered from behind stacked cordwood. Whispers traveled faster than footfall. "There she goes," someone hissed. "Traitor's daughter," came the reply. "Why does she keep coming?" Naomi kept her gaze on the rivulets in the dirt and counted them the way anxious minds count rosary beads. 5 to the split birch, 12 to the broken post, 29 to the rusted deer snare she refused to let anyone set again. She'd memorized every cruel landmark until the walk itself felt like a penance the earth demanded. At the crest, the manor rose from the fog, stone ribs and shuttered windows, a body breathing in darkness. No lanterns burned behind the drapes. No music drifted from the gallery. The alpha who ruled this territory, Michael King, had not been seen in months, not since the night poison smoke rolled across the lower fields and a war that should never have happened broke families the way storms break branches. "Back again," the gate ward muttered, though he no longer tried to bar her. He had learned, she would only come tomorrow if he did. The beta met her halfway down the inner drive, his coat buttoned to the throat. Theo carried a ledger everywhere like a second spine. Today it was tucked beneath his arm, ink smudged at the corner. "Miss Ashford," he said, voice even. "The alpha will not receive you." "I'm not here for courtesy," Naomi answered quietly. "I'm here to help. You've made that clear." Theo's eyes softened for a breath, then shuttered. "Our healers are stretched. But this is not the day." It had not been the day for 2 weeks. Still she came. Not because forgiveness waited behind those doors, but because guilt had teeth, and if she didn't feed it a task it would chew her from the inside out. She turned to leave. On the downward slope, 2 teenagers stared at her with the raw contempt of the newly brave. "What's in the bag?" one called. "More poison." "Salves," Naomi said. "For people you love." They didn't answer. She walked on, counting again to keep her breath steady. 3 to the frost-bent thistle, 9 to the ditch where a fox had dug a den, 40 to the white stone someone had set upright like a marker. No name, just a promise that someone would be remembered. Her father had fought for the wrong promise. Now the consequences lived in the way doors did not open and in the hush that followed her anywhere the wind could carry a story. At the edge of the village she paused. A memory moved in her like a bruise when pressed. Nights of laughter she had thought were love, a man whose smile bent light, the slow realizing that what felt like freedom had been coercion in velvet gloves. The spell was gone. The damage remained. Naomi touched the bag as if it could anchor her to a right choice. If Michael King refused to see her at the gate, then she would find another door to knock. He was an alpha in name and rumor now, a ruler by shadow. The pack survived on routines, on the beta's ledgers and the elders' meetings, and a faith that refused to admit fear. But an alpha cannot live as rumor forever. Sooner or later, a rival tests a rumor and finds bone. She would try again tomorrow. And if tomorrow was not the day, she would try the night. When she reached the last bend, she looked back. The manor seemed to watch her without judgment, stone lids closed over tired eyes. Naomi wondered whether people could become houses, whether a heart could pull all its windows shut and call that safety. She wondered too whether a person like her deserved to knock. She set her jaw and kept walking. Penance was not a feeling. It was a choice you made and made again until your feet knew the road better than they knew the way home. If this story has pulled you in so far, don't forget to show some love. Hit the like button and subscribe so you won't miss what happens next. Your supports are what brings me here daily. Chapter 1. Theo Report. The command scraped out of Michael King like gravel. In the high room of the eastern tower, curtains were tied twice over to starve the light. Charcoal maps papered the walls in neat squares he couldn't see. He stood by the window anyway, habit more than sense. Palms on cold stone, the draft cold enough to convince his body the world still existed beyond pain. Border patrols saw spoor near the marsh fresh, Theo said. Rogues likely testing our rotations. I shifted 2 runners to the north trail and pulled younglings from night watch. Michael listened to the cadence more than the content. His other senses had dulled since the poisoning. Smell a ghost, sight a rumor. He pictured the beta's careful posture, the ledger like a shield. And inside? Michael asked. The crates you requested arrived from the ridge. We can keep the granaries ahead of use if we ration. A beat, then softer. The Ashford healer came again. Heat moved under Michael's skin. The bad heat, the kind that sharpened everything into a point. She can come until winter sets its teeth, he said. It changes nothing. Theo did not argue. He rarely did with Michael's temper drawn tight like wire. The clinic asks for tincture root enough to carry the weak, he said instead, shifting to numbers, safe ground. There's also a petition for your presence at the naming of Faye Heron's son. The elders believe. The elders believe appearances are armor. Michael's mouth twitched, not a smile. Perhaps they are right. What armor could he wear now? Nightshade didn't scar skin. It carved the spaces inside. First his vision had gone gray at the edges. Then sound blurred. Scent, once a language, became a dull chalk line. His wolf paced behind his ribs, caged and furious, and each day the bars bent a little more. You don't have to prove your iron, Theo said quietly. Only that you're here. I'm here, Michael answered and felt the lie find purchase. Here meant a tower room and hands memorizing the room's bones because eyes betrayed him. Here meant refusing every invitation that required a face unflinching in the lantern glow. Here meant a pack surviving on the weight of his name while the man himself receded. Theo cleared his throat. There is one more matter. Quietly raised. Raise it louder. The younger sentries complain about the border snares. Boss. They've caught more deer than danger. The healer has asked twice we remove them. Michael lifted his head toward the window. Frost burned the mornings now. He could feel it in the breath that slipped through cloth and stone. Tell the sentries to check their traps every hour, he said. Tell the healer I don't take orders from ghosts. She signed her name, Theo said. Ghosts don't sign ledgers. Silence stretched. Michael exhaled through his teeth. Is that all? For now. A change in weight. The beta hadn't moved. I am attending the Ridge Conclave for 3 nights. If you require. I require that you go, Michael said. Smile with your teeth. Bring back what can be brought back. Theo's voice tipped warmer. Try to sleep while I'm gone. Michael turned a shoulder toward the sound. I'll sleep when the house does. The house doesn't breathe, Theo murmured. It used to. The words surprised him. Before the smoke, the halls had held music. Laughter slipped beneath doors. Now even the fires crackled like they were afraid to be loud. The door clicked shut. Michael remained by the window until the ache in his hands convinced him to move. He found the chair by the hearth with the heel of his boot, then the table, then the edge of the mantel where someone had placed a small tin. He thumbed it open, recognized the clean bite of mint paste, and almost laughed. Theo and his kindnesses, too practical to name mercy and too constant to ignore. The sound changed the air. Not the housekeeper's careful shuffle, and hummed when she moved, a thread of tune he could follow. This was nothing then something. A hush learning to be a presence. The wolf surged so fast his breath hitched. Michael straightened, the room narrowing to a point. Who's there? He asked softly. No answer. The quiet pressed closer. And then, impossibly, the barest brush of warmth across his awareness. Scent had been a starved animal for months, but it lifted now, sniffed, and found a thread. Spring water over stone, sweet leaf, fear. He did not draw claws. He didn't have to, his voice could be weapon enough. You have 3 beats to explain why you're in my house, he said, and a 4th to explain why you're still alive. The presence flinched. The wolf inside Michael did not like that. It huffed, agitated, confused by the impulse to soothe what it also wanted to drive to ground. A whisper of breath, then a voice, low and steady in the way of people who have decided they will not tremble where others can see. "I'm here to help," the intruder said. "A woman. You won't open your door. So I found one that wasn't locked." Michael's mouth went dry. "Help." The words scraped the places inside him that were too sore to touch. "Name," he said. Silence stretched. "Name," he repeated. "Naomi." A swallow. "Naomi Ashford." The heat returned, sharp as wire. He tasted it. "Theo told you to leave this hill," he said. "He has a ledger," she said. "He also has a conscience." "You have gall," Michael said. "I have work." The floorboards whispered. She'd taken one step nearer. "If you want me thrown out, call your guards. If you want to feel your hands in the river and know it's cold again, let me speak." His laugh startled him, humorless, breaking at the edges. "You presume I trust anyone with that name enough to let them within arm's reach. I don't want your trust." Her voice lowered and something in it cracked cleanly, like thin ice giving way to honest water. "I want a chance to do one thing right where we did 100 wrong." Behind his ribs, the wolf pressed its head against the bars. Michael reached into the air until his fingers met an outline he could not see. Cloth, the heat of breath, the charged hush between two people who should not be standing this close. He did not touch skin. He hovered in the air a hand's breadth away, and felt the strange certainty of a tide shifting under a dark moon. "Step back," he said. He heard her do it. Heard, too, the quiet scrape of the house exhaling, as if it had been holding breath with him. "Leave," he said. "I'll return tomorrow." "Don't." But some part of him knew she would. And some part of him, treacherous as spring, had already counted the beats to the door. Chapter 2. Naomi told herself she would wait for daylight and decorum. She lied. At moonrise she left the motel with her bag and a thudding pulse that made the sidewalk stones feel uneven underfoot. The village slept in the way places do when they are tired of their own gossip. Shutters latched, dogs turning twice in their baskets. She cut through the orchard, slipped past the tannery where the river bent slick and black, and reached the back of the Ironcrest estate where the hill gave up its last breath against the foundation stones. She had watched the patterns for days. The guard who coughed at the turn, the one who lingered too long when the kitchen lamps were doused, the window on the servants' landing that never closed all the way as if the house itself needed a crack to breathe. "Stupid," she whispered and put her fingers into the cold seam of stone anyway. Her shoulder squeaked once against the sill. He froze and listened. Nothing. She pulled herself through into darkness that smelled of starch and cedar and a life kept in orderly lines. She paused long enough to hear the deep ticks in the bones of the place. Water in the wall, the sigh of heating pipes, something small nesting in the eaves. And under it, quieter still, the patient ache of a house that had learned to swallow its noise. She followed what she remembered of the servants' stairs, counting steps and feeling for the worn dip in the center of each tread. On the second landing she nearly turned back when a floorboard creaked like a voice, but she swallowed that fear, the way she had learned to take bitter tonics without grimacing, and kept moving. The tower corridor waited like a throat. Curtains muffled the world to felt. She put her palm to the wall as if the stone might tell her something. Who slept, who hurt, who dreamed. She found the right door not because she knew the map, but because the air changed. The way rooms with pain in them always hold stiller than the rooms beside them. "Who's there?" The voice was low and edged and exhausted all at once. Naomi could have lied. He didn't. "Naomi Ashford," she said, and heard the coil of muscles tight enough to sing. After that, words did what words could. Too little, too much, never enough. And still somehow the house breathed differently around them, as if listening. He saw, no, she felt, how he stood weighted toward sound because sight was treacherous now. She took a step toward that gravity and stopped herself before the need. Hers, not his, dragged her farther. I'm not a spy, she said. Not a fool. Not a miracle worker. A healer. That's all. Leave. I will. Just not yet. She could sense the refusal like a hand between his shoulder blades, ready to shove. She opened her own hands to show she wasn't carrying anything he couldn't see. He would not know it was meant as offering. Perhaps the house would. She backed away, a slow retreat that kept dignity intact. At the stairwell's mouth, the air turned colder. Her skin prickled in warning. She didn't try to understand it. She ran. Outside, frost silvered the grass. She cut for the trees, lungs burning, shame and defiance racing neck and neck. The woods took her scent and threw it back. She didn't see the glint until her paw, because fear took her cleanly, bones reshaping, muscles pulling into the shape that runs better and breathes night easier, landed squarely where steel waited. Metal clenched. Pain went up her leg like a struck bell. Naomi's scream tore through the trees when the iron jaws clamped around her leg. The sound of her thrashing echoed sharp against the night air, metal teeth clanking with each desperate jerk. Inside the manor, Michael's head lifted instantly. He couldn't see her, but he didn't need to. His wolf caught the ragged rhythm of pain in her cries, the tremor of iron shaking in the ground. "Anne," he rasped, already pushing to his feet. The old housekeeper hurried to his side, lantern swinging. She guided him with soft sounds, a cleared throat before a step, a subtle cough at each turn. Michael hated the dependence, but he let it happen. Pride would not free a wolf bleeding in his woods. The closer they came, the sharper Naomi's struggle sounded to him. He could hear the trap groaning under strain, smell the copper bite of blood even through his dulled senses. His wolf strained forward, restless, demanding he answer the call of another in pain. They broke into the clearing, Anne's lantern cutting through the dark. Michael stopped, head tilted, listening hard. He let the world narrow until the rhythm of her pained breaths beat against his ears like a drum. He didn't need eyes. Every sound told him exactly where she was. "Down," he commanded, voice deep and steady. The wolf snarled back, rattling the chain, defiant in agony. Michael stepped closer, boots deliberate on the frosted ground. "Down," he repeated, pouring alpha authority into the word. The forest hushed around him. Naomi's wolf quivered, the fight bleeding out of her. She sank trembling to the earth, panting hard. He crouched carefully, hands feeling along the space until his fingers sank into her fur. His touch was steady, mapping her by pressure and warmth where sight could not. He found her neck, applied firm, calming pressure. "That's it," he murmured, low and certain. "I've got you. Hold still." On the count of 3, Alpha, and said, positioning the lantern near the trap. 1, Michael said, tightening his grip. Naomi flinched but did not resist. 2. Her breathing slowed beneath his hand, caught in the weight of his command. 3. The trap snapped open with a violent clatter, releasing its cruel bite. Naomi whimpered once, then sagged against the snow. Without hesitation, Michael bent and lifted her. She weighed nothing in his arms, all trembling fur and quickened heartbeat. He could not see her face, but he could hear her wolf's ragged breaths slow as she leaned into his chest. "She's safe now," he said, more to himself than to Anne. His wolf rumbled in answer. "Basement?" and asked quietly. Michael's jaw set. "No. My rooms. If she means us harm, I'll hear it faster from there than from the dark." He carried Naomi back through the woods, guided not by sight but by Anne's footsteps and the drum of the heartbeat pressed close to his collarbone. He turned toward the house. Naomi felt the movement in his bones where they met her. She closed her eyes and let the heat tell her, for the length of that walk, that consequences could wait. Chapter 3. The chair had grooves his hands knew, one for thumb, one for the heel of his palm, a place where varnish had worn from the mornings he needed something to push against to remind himself the day would not dictate all the terms. Michael found it without fumbling. He set the wolf on the long table and she did not snap, not even when the ache in her leg made a thin noise in the air. "Hold," he told her and felt her quiver at the word. He gentled his tone. "Good." Anne's hands were swift. "Not broken," she reported. "Clean bite. Foolish contraption. Foolish, foolish." She didn't say whose folly. Michael heard it anyway. "Remove the snares," he said. "The young sentries can learn to track with their eyes and their minds, not their traps." His voice sharpened. "Remove them." Anne's relief was a warmth against the chill. "Yes, Alpha." He should not have kept the creature in his rooms. He knew that. He chose it anyway and wrapped reasons around the choice like bandages that hid more than they healed. Proximity for security, immediate oversight, a test of the house's weak points. The truth was simpler and far less safe. He was tired of his rooms being empty of breath that wasn't his. "Change," he said after the splint was set, not unkindly. "If you can." The wolf's ears flattened. The animal trembled, not with defiance but with something that made Michael's knuckles ache. "Shame." "What holds you?" he asked, surprising himself. He had no patience for being patient, not for months now. Yet here he was, speaking as if gentleness were a language he still remembered. The wolf licked his fingers and stoked the fire. He followed the sound to the hearth and knelt. The lighter had a nick on the wheel. He mapped it with his thumb, then coaxed life from tinder while the animal shuffled nearer, the soft huff of her breath guiding his hands to the kindling when his sight made ghosts of angles. "There," he said when flame caught. Heat moved across his face like an answer. He sat back against the chair leg. The wolf settled beside him, head near his knee, as if this were a thing they had done 100 nights and would do 100 more. He did not reach to touch her. He waited until she scooted an inch in what could only be called a hopeful direction, then laid his palm against her skull and felt the shiver go out of her with a sigh that eased something mean in him. "Why are you here?" he asked after a time. She whined softly. The sound had vowels in it if a person knew how to listen. "To help," he translated dry. "So you said." The fire worked. The room breathed. Michael's wolf lowered its head to its paws, eyes open, watchful but not wild. He let his shoulders ask the chair for permission to rest and took the smallest portion that was offered. And left them with a tray she bumped against his knuckles so he could find it when he wanted. He did not want. He wanted sleep, but sleep had learned his tells and fled the minute he approached it. So he sat and the animal breathed, and the house remembered what it was to have two steady hearts in one room. Sometime toward dawn, when the edges of the dark eased from iron to slate, Michael felt the air change. The weight against his knee disappeared for a heartbeat, as if absence could tell him anything when sight would not. Then the same weight returned, subtly different. "Don't move," he said, reflexive, and heard his own foolishness. She stilled, as if obeying cost her dignity she could spare. He did not look. Looking was useless and would render him clumsy in a way he loathed. He lifted his hand and found skin. Not fur. Warmth, yes, but with the small electric hum that only the human shape carried for him now, because loss had taught him to catalog differences so he might pretend he still possessed facts. He took his hand away at once, as if he had touched a flame. "You can go," he said, not sure which of them he was protecting. "Not out of the house. Out of this room. Get a robe. And we'll find you one. We'll discuss the rest when my patience isn't a puddle on the floor." She did not go. The weight remained. Then in a rush of breath the wolf was there again. He found fur and exhaled. "Cowardice is sometimes wisdom," he said. "Sometimes not." He did not know which this was. He slept with his hand in thick ruff, the way a man sleeps when he is surprised by trust and too tired to argue with it. Chapter 4. Morning arrived like a dare. Michael woke to heat marks where the wolf had been and to the smell of water steaming off river stones. The faint scent he had learned as Naomi's, though he pretended he hadn't. He could see a suggestion of light the way people see warmth through closed lids. He did not open his eyes. The world blurred worse when he looked it in the face. The shower gave him his privacy and his pretense. When he emerged and had left porridge and bread, and the wolf sat by the door with the patience of a creature who has mastered hunger's manners. "You're still here," he said. She thumped her tail once. "You plan to run the instant I sleep again," he said. 2 tail thumps. "Brazen." He said, mouth trying a smile and nearly finding one. "No running yet. Walk first." He found her by scent and the heat of her shoulder. When his palm settled there, she rose so smoothly it felt choreographed. They navigated the corridor, past the window where he could sense light hum brighter, down into the kitchen where Anne, bless her, shut her shock in a cupboard and handed Michael a mug with exactly the right weight. "Less afraid today," Anne observed. "Of you?" "Never," Michael said dryly. The wolf sneezed in something like agreement. "Of the house. Perhaps. Of herself," Anne murmured, and Michael tucked that away to look at later when he had the spine for tenderness. They walked the interior circuit, Naomi guiding him with small nudges at his hand. Left at the carpet seam, right at the nicked banister, stop where the gallery floor bowed because the joists had settled in the year the river flooded. He counted breaths without meaning to and found they matched hers by the 3rd turn. He told himself it was efficient to match cadence with a guard animal. He did not examine why his shoulders lowered when they paced together. "Name," he said finally, because the mind makes mischief when you do not give it tasks. "Let me guess." He pointed into the air, not at her, never at her. "Ruth." A growl like a laugh. "Hazel." Huff huff. Oh. "Brunhild." An outraged snarl that startled his own laugh clean from him. It hung in the air like something from the old months, when rooms echoed differently. "All right," he said softer. "Not Hazel. Brunhild." She touched his knee with her nose. "Thank you for the laugh," that gesture said. He pretended he didn't understand languages he supposed he had forgotten. That night, when his exhaustion took him hard and without mercy, Naomi moved like smoke. She knelt by his chair and set her fingers lightly to his temples, the way her mother had taught her. No dramatic flourishes, no words to wake fear, just the work. Finding the ragged places between the man and his wolf and singing them a stitcher's song made of warmth and patience. "Slow," she whispered to the parts of him that fought each other out of habit now. "Slow and then together." Power moved, not lightning, not spectacle. Warmth threaded. The bars of the cage bent a fraction. The wolf, surprised, stopped chewing the metal long enough to listen. Naomi's tears fell because relief is its own kind of pain and because kindness given to the undeserving hurts the healer as much as the healed. She scrubbed them away with the heel of her hand and kept working until his breath lengthened and the throb at his temple eased and the room itself felt less frightened to be a room. She stood on trembling legs, meaning to run, to save herself from the weight of what she wanted. She reached the door. Her hand met cold brass. His sleeping face in profile looked younger. She turned and came back instead. In the morn's gray, her wolf took her again, panic snapping the thread, and when he woke, it was a wolf curled in the crook of the chair and not a woman with salt-damp fingers. "You're stuck," he said thoughtfully. "Not always, but often." She pressed her head into his palm, grateful he could make a truth sound like a weather report instead of a verdict. Chapter 5. Day braided itself into routine. Naomi shepherded Michael through tasks that were at once dignities and humiliations. Dignity. The alpha's hand on the railing, steady without needing a guide who wasn't a wolf. Humiliation. The way his mouth tightened when he misjudged the chair by an inch and bumped his shin, then pretended it hadn't happened by asking Theo about grain counts with too much briskness. Theo returned from the ridge with agreements ink-stained and eyes more tired than his voice. "You," he began when he saw the wolf trailing Michael down the corridor, then altered the sentence mid-flight. "You are well, Alpha?" Michael's mouth ticked. "Define well." "Not today," Theo decided, filing his questions for later, the way he always did with things that smelled like grief. "Later." Michael agreed, and Naomi loved them both momentarily for being men who carried their care without scaring it away with clatter. In the evenings, Michael talked to the wolf like a man who had forgotten the trick of talking to himself. He told her about summer markets on the green and the year he'd burned a stew so badly it fused to the bottom of the pot, and the way his sister would sing the wrong words on purpose to make their mother laugh. He didn't tell her about the night smoke thickened the light and old friends coughed foam and he crawled to the upper room because the lower air felt like teeth. He didn't tell her how, after sound had stretched thin like it was ashamed to be loud around him. "Tell me about your mother," he said once, catching himself and redirecting. "No. Don't. Keep your secrets. Earn mine." She laid her head in his lap and took the bargain for what it was. Time. Round the fifth night the world changed. Not completely. Not dramatically. But when he opened his eyes, Michael saw the edge of his hand, shadowed, imprecise, and the outline of the hearth where fire made an orange smear. He sat very still. The wolf, asleep against his boot, woofed in a dream and gave a kick, as if pursuing whatever wolves pursue when they run without moving. "Anne," he whispered when he could trust voice. "The curtain. The far one." She obeyed without question. Night leaned its face closer. The smear sharpened by a hair. Michael's breath left him with a sound he had not made in months. Hope is cruel when you feed it too soon. It is also the only meal that gives back. He turned toward the wolf. Found not fur but skin where his palm met a temple. For one blink of a heartbeat he saw a spill of hair on his pillow and a bare shoulder with light on it like poured cream. He closed his eyes, not to disappear her but to memorize the idea that such lines existed at all. He left the room then because relief made him unsteady and because Anne's voice had arrived at the door in a shape he did not like. Taut, thin, braided with the kind of caution that pretends to be composure. "Alpha," she breathed. "Visitors. At the gate." He followed her down. Mist beaded his lashes. The iron bars held two figures in the lantern wash. Theo with his ledger like a shield and a slim woman beside him whose scent hit Michael the way thunder arrives a half-second after lightning. Anticipated and still startling. "Alpha Voss," the woman said chin high. "I am Mira Ashford. Where is my sister?" Michael could almost see the outline of her fury, the way a storm cloud shows its muscles if you look sideways. He felt the wolf behind his ribs lift its head, interested not in threat but in the fact of sister, the way some words rearrange the furniture of your chest simply by existing. "Inside," he said. "Safe." Myra's exhale laced relief with anger. "Safe," she repeated. "Under your roof." "Under mine," he agreed. He pressed her lips together, accounting. "Then you and I have terms to speak," she said, and it was not a threat so much as the announcement of a necessary labor like harvest. By morning terms had multiplied. Theo's eyes were careful, and hovered with tea and mercy. And a new sound, worse than the fox in the eaves, more ominous than the weight of well-meant traps, joined the whole. The neat, expensive cadence of Petra Arden, council daughter, who had been promised to Michael in a spring that felt like someone else's life. "Alpha," Petra said sweetly, the kind of sweet people use on wolves they think have been declawed. "We should finalize the date." "The date," Michael echoed, the smear of the hearth catching again at the edge of what might be sight. He had forgotten how much the world could ask on a day a man's hope woke without his permission. Naomi, still in wolf shape, saw Petra the way wolves see things. As arrangement, as posture, as smell. Pretty, yes. Polished, yes. Her smile did the work of a ribbon on a crate. It promised contents without admitting weight. Naomi's own wolf rose like wind through grass. Petra's gaze landed on Naomi and slid away like she had no name. Michael's hand found Naomi's head without looking. His fingers curled, absent, proprietary in a way that did not claim so much as anchor. "Later," Michael told Petra, voice even. "We'll speak later." "Alpha," Petra said, and her smile didn't so much as chip. When the door shut, Michael knelt. "I should have sent you away," he said to Naomi's fur. "I will not." She breathed out a sound that contained both surrender and resolve. That night when sleep took him, Naomi did not run. She set her hands on him and sang the body-quiet song again until the wolf inside him stopped pacing and for the first time in months, put its nose on its paws and closed its eyes. The bond between Naomi and Michael is only growing deeper. But trust me, the hardest choices are still ahead. If you're enjoying this story, pause for a moment to like this video and subscribe. That way you'll always be here when I post my stories. Chapter 6. Mira Ashford did not ask for tea. She chose the chair with its back to the window and clasped her hands like a woman holding together two halves of a bridge while others crossed. "You understand why I came," she said. Michael stood instead of sitting. Standing kept the dizziness manageable. Let him feel the room's edges with his bones. Naomi lay at his feet in wolf shape, her chin on her paws, ears inclined toward every syllable. "You climbed my hill," Michael said. "You walked to my gate, alone at night. You want your sister. I want her alive." Myra's gaze slid to the wolf and back. "If she is under your roof, I'll speak plainly. The council watches this territory. They will use any crack they find. Let them try." Michael's mouth tightened. "They will meet stone. Stone breaks," Mira said softly. "But a woven thing, something living, bends and holds. That is why Naomi stayed. To mend what was torn." The name landed in the room. Michael did not flinch. He angled his head toward the window. "Miss Ashford," he said, choosing the formality like armor, "your sister trespassed in the only room I have left that isn't a ledger. She is also the reason I slept last night without waking with my wolf's teeth in my own hand. I keep careful accounts. Debt runs in both directions." Myra's shoulders lowered a fraction. "Then keep a better account than the men who convinced our father to do what he did," she said. "Let me see her. After, we can argue policy like civilized people." Michael gestured and Anne, unflappable Anne, opened the inner door. The wolf rose. She took 2 steps and then another, slower. The hall's light caught her eyes and made them green glass. She approached her sister with a caution that wasn't fear so much as embarrassment. The shame of being seen in a shape you did not choose. "Naomi," Mira whispered and went to her knees. She didn't reach at first. She bowed her head in greeting, letting her hands rest palms down on the floorboards. The old way they'd learned at their mother's knee when a frightened animal needed a moment to decide whether a person could be trusted. Naomi pressed her forehead to those hands and exhaled. The sound stitched something in Michael he hadn't admitted was torn. Theo lingered in the doorway with his ledger like a shield and his eyes like a friend's. "Rogues on the north switchback," he said. "Circling. Testing." Michael's wolf lifted its head. "How many?" "3 for certain. Maybe 5 hanging back. Keep the young ones behind the second fence," Michael said, automatic, the old gears re-engaging. "Rotate the path so they never see the same silhouette twice. No snares," he added, sharper. "I want minds comfortable with tracking. Not hands comfortable with teeth they didn't grow." Theo's yes, Alpha, carried a satisfaction that was not merely obedience. The beta withdrew, and ushered Mira to a small room with a fire and a quilt Naomi had mended the night before when worry had made her hands foolish with energy. Michael and the wolf were alone again. He lowered into his chair with the relief of a man who remembers the exact height of ground after walking too long on uncertain stone. "You are not a dog," he said, because humor dulled the edge on fear. "But if you are going to guard me, we should set terms. Term 1, you eat. Term 2, you sleep. Term 3, when I stand you don't bolt like a hare." The wolf huffed. Her tail made one deliberate thump like a signature. "Good," he said. Term 4, you will tell me, however you can, when you want me to stop speaking. I will try to obey." She lifted her head and nudged his palm. He understood. "Keep speaking then." He did. He told her the names of the ridgelines he'd never see again as he once had. He told her where he'd hidden a tin soldier as a boy and how it took his sister 3 months to find it because he'd buried it under a floorboard he could only reach by lying on his stomach and swearing he could smell the oceans on maps. "Petra will return," he said at last, because the truth, when put off, grows teeth. "She believes my name is a hinge that will open every door she wants." The wolf's ears flattened. "And you," he finished quietly, "are the only door I have opened in months because I wanted to." She lay her head on his boot again. A tether settled between them. Not a chain, not a leash, something woven. A thing that bent and held. Chapter 7. For 3 mornings the fog didn't lift until noon. During those hours the estate belonged to sound and scent. Michael counted both like currencies, testing their value against memory. On the second morning he sensed a new thread in the air, spiked and metallic, the prelude to an argument, and knew Petra had returned before she knocked. "Alpha," she said brightly, and even the brightness sounded expensive. "We have so much to finalize." Michael angled his body between Petra and the wolf without meaning to. "We have much to reconsider," he corrected. Petra's gaze slid to the animal at his heel. "There are kennels," she said sweetly. "If you require a place for the—" "She remains," Michael said, the words simple as a weight placed on a table. "She is not a pet. She is under my protection." "So many strays under your roof," Petra murmured. "It will confuse the council. They like their lines clean." "Then they should draw them better," Michael replied. Petra didn't flinch. She had learned the same schools of politeness that taught men to cut with grammar. "The harvest feast is in 2 weeks. A public ceremony will reassure the people." "Of what?" "That a steady hand holds the reins." "Reins are for beasts," Michael said. "I hold a trust." Petra smiled the way people smile at portraits, politely without letting their eyes change. "We'll speak again," she said, and took her lilac scent with her like a flag. The wolf shifted closer to Michael's leg. He set his hand on her head and did not apologize for needing the steadiness she offered. That afternoon, Theo returned with a face like weather. "Rogues tested the switchback and withdrew," he said. "But not before leaving a token." "What kind?" Michael asked. Theo laid a strip of torn bark on the table. Symbols had been scored into it, simple marks in a child's hand. "Counting," he said. "The numbers climb each day." "Message received," Michael murmured. "They know we are thin." "Or they think we are," Theo returned. "Thin is not the same as hollow," Michael said. "Put eyes on the ravine and ears by the old mill." When the house quieted, Naomi tried again to shift. Fear tripped her at the last breath, the spectral voice of old coercion slithering between her ribs. "Are you sure? Are you sure this is your choice?" She held herself still until the old voice went thin with lack of air. Then, shaking, she padded to Michael's chair and pressed her nose to his wrist. "I know," he said without opening his eyes. "It isn't simple." She wanted to tell him everything. Not because confession buys absolution, but because truth makes clean lines where lies make smears. But the words sat trapped behind her teeth, human and useless in a wolf's mouth. She settled for staying close while he slept and laying her head on his knee when dawn made the window bleed pale. On the third day, when Anne drew the outer curtains, Michael caught a silhouette, himself in the window's wavering glass. He stared at the blur of shoulder, at the suggestion of hand, until his breath shook. "Don't chase it," Anne whispered. "Let it come to you." He obeyed for once. He let the idea of sight sit like an apple on the table, present, fragrant, not yet his. He did not reach. The wolf at his heel sighed and, with that small sound, stopped his hands from trembling. At dusk, the patrol whistles went up in the wrong order. The wrong order meant trouble. Michael stood so fast the chair scraped. He did not ask Theo to report. He knew where the field broke thin. "We go together," he told the wolf, and the "we" felt like the first right thing he had said in months. They reached the north verge at a steady pace, not a run. That was a choice too. Panic burns its own harvest. The fog lay low in the comb. Shapes moved within it like half-remembered men. Show yourself, Michael called, voice thrown to Carrie. Or leave. Those are your only two choices. A laugh answered, young, mean, delighted by its own echoes. A blind alpha, the laugh said. A house full of women and pets. A ledger man. We count, Voss. Numbers climb. Come do arithmetic at my gate, Michael said. Bring your cousins. Bring your fear. I will show you what doesn't add up. The shapes wavered. They did not break. The wolf beside him stood without a sound, her body a line pointed at the fog. Michael felt the old power return. Not the kind that depends on eyes, the other kind. Presence, command, the authority of a man who has thrown himself across a breach and refuses to move. Now, he said softly, and Theo's runners, already in place, loosed a low wall of sound. Pot lids and chain on drum skins, a making of noise that confused the ear and made the hill seem steeper than it was. The fog did the rest. The shapes broke and ran. Sometimes victory is not a clash. Sometimes it is the refusal to give one. Michael's knees shook when it was over. He let them. He set a hand on the wolf's back and leaned for the length of 2 breaths, then straightened. We do not chase, he said. We tend our edges. We make no feast for fools. The wolf's tail flicked once. Agreement. He found enough sight to catch the gesture and enough breath to laugh. Chapter 8. The house had emptied of danger and filled with talk. Men carry fear in voices that brag. Women carry it in the number of blankets they bring to a room where one would do. And put 3 blankets by the hearth and added a pot of stew that could have fed a small battalion. Mira stood when Naomi entered in wolf form, then sat again the way sisters do when relief finally catches up with posture. I'll sleep after you do, she told Naomi simply, and Naomi, who had held the night still with her teeth, lay down without arguing. When she woke hours later, the room was quiet. Michael sat at the table with Theo's ledger open and a quill idle in his hand. He had turned toward the window, not to see, sight was a thin thread still, but to listen. Night speaks differently at a window. Your name, he said without looking, and Naomi's belly dropped. It's written in this ledger. Naomi Ashford. You signed for tinctures. Twice. She could have run. Her leg had healed enough to make running an option that no longer hurt like a knife. She did not move. I should have asked before now, Michael said, and the admission cost him. I chose not to because I liked the space where not knowing gave me mercy. He closed the ledger. His fingers were steady. It is time for knowing. Naomi's shift fought her like a door swollen in summer. She pushed anyway because some doors do not open for you until you've put your shoulder into them, and grunted like a fool. The change took her cleanly on the exhale. She came up on her knees with the quilt around her shoulders, hair a spill, breath uneven, eyes wide. I am Naomi Ashford, she said, because truth, when spoken, becomes a thing with shape. I came because your people needed a healer. I stayed because you needed one more than you would admit. And because, her throat closed, she forced it open, because I wanted to. He did not accuse. He did not stand. He lowered his head a fraction as if to catch the sound of her words in their true shape. You are from the family that... Yes, she said. I am from the family that broke this hill. I am also from a woman who taught me how to bind wounds and condemn men who call harm mercy. Those truths live together in me. I came up your road because both demanded it. And you didn't tell me your name because you have every reason to throw the name in my face, she said, calm now. I needed a week to show you something else to call me in case you wanted to. Silence moved between them like weather passing over tall grass. He let it pass. You healed me, he said at last, not as flattery, not as a gift he didn't owe her, as a fact placed between them like a plank. I see smudges where there was nothing. I smell rain 2 hours before it falls. I sleep. Naomi's eyes filled and did not spill. Good. The council will want blood or spectacle, Michael said, mouth crooked. We will give them neither. We will give them grain forecasts and border counts and the sight of an alpha who can hold a room and a healer who can hold a pulse. You mean to keep me here, she said, and her voice contained fear and relief in equal measure. I mean to ask you to remain, he corrected, because consent draws lines where coercion smears them. For as long as it is your choice. And to pay you in coin that spends, not in promises. It was never for coin. I know. That's why I trust you enough to offer it. She laughed through a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. That is the worst compliment I've ever been given. Probably, he agreed and felt the room shift its weight to a more comfortable leg. The door clicked. Petra glided in with her smile like a sealed envelope. There are papers, she said brightly. Your signature, Alpha. Michael angled toward the sound. Later. Now, Petra said, and then saw the woman by the hearth, quilted and disheveled and very clearly not a servant. Her glance moved as if she were slicing a ribbon. You allow strays to nest in your rooms. How darling. Petra, Michael said, and for the first time his voice lost its courteous edges. Miss Ashford is under my protection and my roof by invitation. Choose your words accordingly. Miss, Petra's eyes sparked. Ashford. Naomi Ashford, Naomi supplied, standing without shrinking. Healer. Guest. Not a pet. Petra's smile did not chip, but the corners of it grew teeth. The council will be fascinated. I pity them, Michael said. Imagine the poverty of a life in which fascination is a substitute for duty. Petra set her papers on the table as if she were laying down a gauntlet. The feast, she said. I expect you both to attend. The people should see what you've woven. She left the scent of lilac and the soft menace of silk behind. Michael exhaled. Naomi folded the quilt tighter around her shoulders and discovered, to her surprise, that her hands were steady. Chapter 9. The harvest feast carried the weight of a promise and the danger of a crowd. Lanterns hung along the green. Children wove between tables. Old men spoke louder than necessary as if out talking winter. Michael walked at a measured pace, Theo 2 steps behind his left shoulder, Naomi at his right, close enough to anchor, far enough to let him do the work of standing on his own legs. Sight had returned in fragments. Edges, contrast, the harmless blur that lets a man recognize a friend by posture and a threat by the way a room inhales. He saw the glint of Petra's hair and the stillness around counselors like a cold pocket over a river bend. He saw Mira on the edge of the crowd, relief in her shoulders, warning in her eyes. Breathe, Naomi murmured, so quiet he wasn't sure if she'd spoken aloud. He breathed. The night breathed back. Elders asked safe questions. Michael answered with safe truths. Grain would hold. Patrols had shifted. Winter would be met with stock and schedule. The rope dancers performed on the west side of the green. Children cheered. A fiddler missed a note and laughed. These small mercies hold a town together better than charters. Petra waited until the quiet after the third song, when attention softens enough to be turned. She stepped to the center with a goblet that caught every lantern and reflected them back more beautifully than the lanterns deserved. Friends, she called, you have asked for reassurance. You will have it. Alpha Voss honors tradition tonight. Michael did not take the cup. Tradition is a living thing, he said, and the way the air altered told him everyone's ears had made the same small motion forward. It isn't a patchwork to hide rot. It's a braid. You weave what was true with what must be true now, or it snaps when you need it most. You undo your pledge? Petra asked, voice silk over stone. I refuse to use a woman's body as a treaty, Michael said. I ask your family's counsel, I owe you respect. I do not owe you myself. He let the murmur rise and fall. Our alliance stands on law, not ceremony. If that is not enough, say so with courage and we will adjust the map. Petra's eyes turned flint hard. And your wolf? She asked, all sweetness evaporated. The one at your heel. Is she a law? A ceremony? A pet. Naomi stepped forward before he could. I am a person, she said, voice ringing clean through the hush. My name is Naomi Ashford. I am staying because I choose to and leaving if I choose to. That is the only braid strong enough to hold. The gasp that skated the crowd wasn't shock alone. It was excitement. Towns love a spectacle. Councils love a scandal. Rumor is as nourishing and as dangerous as wine. An Ashford, Petra said deliciously. Do you drink with your enemies now, Alpha? Do you bed them? Do you ask them to tend your wounds? Yes, Michael said, and the yes moved through the green like a stone through water, ripples crossing until they met the bank. Because the word enemy does not feed children. Work does. Justice does. So does the kind of love that treats a person like an end and not a tool. The word love was not a plan, it was a bell. It rang and something inside Naomi, long locked and cleverly guarded, stood up and answered. Before anyone could shape the night to their purpose, whistles split the air. Wrong pattern. Not theater. Trouble. Theo's hand found Michael's shoulder. One tap, then two, North Line, River Bend. Michael didn't look at Petra. He didn't explain. He moved. Naomi moved with him. The crowd parted because crowds always do when purpose walks like it means itself. Chapter 10. The river bend held fog like a secret. Rouge lanterns bobbed on the far bank. A child's trick to look like many eyes. Michael stopped at the edge where the path turned slick and the old oak's roots laced the ground like veins. They think they frighten, Theo murmured. They think I can't see, Michael returned, and the softness in his voice was not weakness, it was focus. Naomi went to her knees beside him. How many? He whispered. She closed her eyes and listened. The river speaks if you let it. 4 footfalls in wet grass. 2 more farther off. 1 heartbeat faster than the rest. Fear, not fury. She touched Michael's wrist once. 5 and a coward. Good, he said and stood. He did not roar. He did not brandish. He walked 3 steps into the fog and let it swallow him to the waist, and then he spoke in a voice that had made rooms hold still since before he had hair on his face. Nothing waits for you here, he said. No meat. No fear. No audience. Go home. Home is hungry, a man's voice spat. Then bring your hunger to my gate tomorrow with your tools, Michael said, still measured. You'll harvest for coin and eat like men. Or you can try to take. But if you take, I will count that as theft from children. I will answer it like theft and I will not apologize. A figure lunged from the fog. Young, sloppy, convinced that speed is a substitute for skill. Michael sidestepped without seeing. The movement lived in his body the way a song lives in a throat. He caught the lunger's shoulder, twisted, and set him face down in the mud without breaking him. Go, he said again, and this time the fog carried the word back to its cousins with edges sharpened by the sound of a boy coughing river water. The shapes retreated. The last one lingered. The fast heartbeat that had betrayed fear. Michael didn't raise his voice. You too, he said. Leave while leaving is easy. The shape dissolved. The fog unrolled the path back like a spill of wool. Only when they were alone did Michael's breath shudder. He sat on the oak's root like a man who has been holding a door shut against wind and wants a minute to count his fingers. Naomi set her hands on his face without thinking and then did not take them away because the day had stripped her of caution and left only truth. Stay with me, he said, and the rawness in it was not a command, it was a confession. I am, she answered. Not because I owe. Because I choose. Say your name, he said, and felt foolish for needing it. Naomi, she whispered, fierce as a vow. Naomi Ashford. He closed his eyes. He opened them. The world met him with more edges than it had the day before. He saw her hair as a dark shape and her mouth as a curve he recognized now without needing to imagine it. He saw the river's skin and the lantern's pale veins. It felt like waking into a room you thought you'd never enter again and finding your coat still on the chair where you'd left it. Then hear mine, he said, and something inside his chest that had been sleeping like an old dog lifted its head, because names are a kind of magic we still have the right to use. Michael. Stay with me, Naomi. By your terms. No chains. No bargains made over your body. Just the work and the days and the way this house breathes when you walk through it. She laughed, not because anything was funny but because relief needed a sound. I will, she said. They returned to the green to find Petra waiting with a face like winter glass. So, she said softly, too soft. This is your answer. My answer, Michael said, is a house that breathes and borders that hold and a people who can sleep through the night. If you want a ceremony, go hire a band. If you want an alliance, bring a contract that doesn't require my soul. Petra's mouth pressed into a line that would look lovely on marble someday. The council will remember, she said. So will the children we feed, Naomi answered, because she was tired of watching Michael spend all his words alone. Petra left. The night exhaled. Music resumed by degrees, like a hearth coaxed back to flame after wind. Michael turned his head, seeking. Mira, he called. If your sister is to stay, we must set rules that keep her safe from both our enemies and our friends. Mira stepped forward with her chin high. Good, she said. I like rules that begin with safety. Rule 1, Michael said. No snares. He glanced at Naomi and found for the first time the exact green of her eyes. Ever. She blinked. Her mouth trembled. Rule 2, she said, daring. You eat when and tells you and not just when you remember to. He huffed. Yes, healer. The crowd, sensing the shape of a new story, found other things to talk about, as crowds do when leaders have said enough truth for one night. The book. Healing proved itself to be less a staircase than a field. Some days they crossed it in 10 strides. Others they moved one grass blade at a time. Michael's sight returned in increments. Shadow into edge, edge into form, form into the honest, unremarkable miracle of seeing a man's hand and knowing whether it held a cup or a lie. The house learned new habits. Windows opened. Traps vanished from the borders. Young sentries competed to track by mind and ear. And hummed again in the mornings, a tune with an extra note that sounded suspiciously like satisfaction. Theo replaced his ledger's first page. Where there had been columns for shortages and debts, he wrote new headings. Hours slept, fights not had, names learned. He smiled when Naomi laughed at him and told her this too is arithmetic. Petra Arden did not attend the winter councils. She sent letters instead, clever, cutting the ink so black it looked wet. Michael answered with courtesy and nothing else. The council, deprived of spectacle, discovered the dull grace of governance. Timetables, flood maps, agreements written in verbs instead of adjectives. Mira returned to her own ridge with a promise to come for supper on the first thaw and a threat to break Michael's door if Naomi ever sent a message that smelled like tears. Naomi kissed her sister's cheek and said she would use the door if it needed breaking. On the coldest night of winter, Naomi woke to find Michael standing by the window with the curtain lifted and the world frost silver. He did not turn. I can see the wind moving the birch, he said. Not just hear it. See it. It looks like a boy trying to stand on one foot and failing with good humor. Naomi slid her arms around his waist from behind and rested her cheek between his shoulder blades. You always see more than you admit, she said. Perhaps. He covered her hands with his. Stay with me while it keeps happening. I will, she said and pointed out the small fox trail stitching the garden, the ridge light too far to matter and close enough to comfort, the way the world glowed where it had been stepped on and remained dull where it was untouched. We will. He turned then and the sight of her, clear, unblurred, hit him so hard he laughed, helpless, as if someone had told a joke only his bones understood. He touched her cheek and marveled at not having to hesitate first, not having to map and memorize before he was permitted to love with his eyes. In spring, when the children ran to the river and the women unrolled rugs on the green and the first market strawberries tasted like they had been sugared by rumor, Michael went to the edge of the north field and pulled up the last marker stone he had kept as a private penance. He carried it to the house and set it by the door. "What's this?" Anne asked, wiping her hands on her apron. "A reminder," Michael said. "That stone holds. But only because something living holds it there." Naomi, watching from the step, pressed a hand to her belly with a look that might have been startle or might have been awe. She didn't say anything yet. She would, when the braid of knowing and wanting tightened into a word she trusted. For now there was work. The kind that keeps out hunger and invites laughter. The kind that lets a house remember how to breathe and a hill remember how to hold. They did it together with rules that bent and love that did not. And when the fog rolled low again on summer nights, they stood at the river bend and knew what waited on both banks. Not enemies and allies, but people stubborn and hungry, all of them walking roads they hoped would take them somewhere worth staying. And when darkness tried to make a little empire under their roof, they lit a fire and sat without speaking until the quiet grew warm again. That too is a way of holding. And that's where our story leaves them, healed, united, and stronger than before. If you felt the power of their journey, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. More unforgettable romances and adventures are waiting just around the corner, and I'd love for you to be here when I post my next story.